broadcast, and it seems like they're all special now because Brother Andrew's not here. So that's what we say every time Andrew's not here is we have a very special broadcast. But he's busy right now, and Lord willing, when his meetings slow down a little bit, he'll be back with us. But tonight, we have our friend, Pastor Joel Tillis of the Soul Trap. And if you're not listening to the Soul Trap, then my question to you is, what are you doing? You're missing out if you're not listening to the Soul Trap. That last one, brother, the one about the visitors.
Yes.
That was creepy stuff.
Yeah, that one was. Hey, we're glad to be on the show, and our prayers do go out for Brother Andrew. I know that he's involved in a lot of ministry and carries a lot of weight on his shoulders, and so as always, it's an honor to be on. But we're glad to be with you, excited to be with you, and that visitors that was a really exciting one. It was interesting working on it. It's kind of spooky to work on it. Sometimes we'd be up here late at the studio doing some recording. We're like, we're done. Let's go home. So it was interesting on our end as well.
Right. I hear you. Well, here's what I'm going to ask everyone to do. I've got to keep my phone away from the microphone or it'll start buzzing. I don't know if people can hear that as it moves closer. But everybody needs to right now like and share. Like and share right now. So that we can, and right when I go to do that, someone texts me. But like and share right now so that we can get this video out. We're talking about a very interesting topic tonight. We are talking about this whole deal with the Pentagon, just out of the blue, and in a very strange time, deciding to drop these videos of UFOs. And so the timing, I think, is very strange because of what we're going through as a nation. And arguably, a lot of that is being brought on by governments. But not only the timing of that, but the fact we've had this video for a while. And also the fact that they've been sitting on different proofs like this for, what would you say, Brother Tillis, 70, 80 years?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting thing, and I think you're very accurate to say the timing of the release of this. Really, it's not disclosure, but it's the release. It's the release of the Pentagon going, yeah, this is what it looks like. For all intents and purposes, the Pentagon said, yeah, this is a UFO, and they've never done that, and that's what makes this particular case very, very interesting. There's always been anomalies. There's always been, the percentage that even the Air Force and NASA and the Pentagon have had to say, well, we're not sure what that anomaly is. This one they released and said, yeah, what you see is what you get. We don't know how to explain it, and there it is. And they have never, ever, ever done that. As far back as the Condon reports, the mysteries coming out of the Majestic 12, all of those issues like that, they've always been somewhat subtle about it. This one was in your face. Here are the videos. We think it's a UFO. We don't know what it is. And then you have to put that together with what's going on with the Wuhan virus. Then you put that together with what's going on with the election. I think people are underplaying Joe Biden being the nominee. That is a fascinating thing because that just is handing the election to Donald Trump. I mean, it's clear Joe Biden is battling dementia. That is just clear. So when you start putting all these things together, you have to go, man, why is the Pentagon doing this now? It's a very fascinating thought to really dive into.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen this video that is just being talked about right now. Now, what was the official release on this as far as the recent release where they said, yeah, this is what you're looking at?
Yeah, well,
just past week or two, was it?
Yeah, it was just very recently. Well, the one video was actually in 2004, and there's a lot of cross chat back and forth about how all of it was brought out. But it was as way back as 2004. The most recent, I believe, was there was a second video that was taken, maybe a second or third, but it was taken off the coast of Jacksonville, and that's a very interesting thought right there, because probably these are two or three of the most clear videos of a technical unidentified flying object that we have, and they both happen over warm water near the coast. So that's a whole subject to get into right there. But there was one off the coast of Mexico, and then there was one off the coast of Jacksonville. And the clips that were shown were being tracked not by airline pilots, which should be acceptable witnesses, or not by just everyday guys like you and me, but these were fighter pilots, Navy pilots that were very, very adept at seeing, both things that should be there and things that shouldn't be there. So it came out into the UFO world. Then it came out a little bit into mainstream. But again, the Pentagon they play everything close to the vest. So there never was expected to be much other than this was going to go down in just another one of the myriad of stories that we have of unexplained events, until the Pentagon finally released and they came out and they officially released the 3 videos. And they said that it is and I'm going to quote here, an unexplained aerial phenomenon. Well, that is as good as saying that's a UFO for the Pentagon. That's what they're saying. And so when they did that, it was tremendous. And then there was actually, let me see here. There was actually, I'm going to quote here from part of the release. The statement released on Monday added that the videos, after a thorough review, which determined that the unclassified video does not reveal any sensitive capabilities or systems, it doesn't impinge on any investigations of military airspace. They said there's nothing really here that's going to bother us. We're going to release it. But they also said there's nothing really here that we can explain. And so it's just very interesting why they would release it, because you have hard evidence there. So why they were determined to release that now, that's the $64,000 question that I think people like you and me and people in our genre are asking. It's not disclosure, but it is an admission. And so why now?
And I think if people aren't really aware of this topic, or maybe have not read much on this topic, there is a general understanding still that things of this nature have been downplayed, have been hidden. And so this is very out of the ordinary.
Yes.
And I would just couple with what you said, the fact that we've got all of these other things that are connecting with it. How are we going to connect the dots for all these pieces? Because I'm sure they connect somehow.
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting. And I think, from here at the Soul Trap, and I know it's the same for you guys, we look at everything through the lens of the Bible. And it's very interesting that there have always been, and there's a great book by Jacques Vallée called Wonders in the Sky. He actually co-wrote it. And it does a history going all the way back, I want to say to the early, let's see, 160s BC, prior to Christ. But there's always been aerial phenomenon. In fact, Josephus wrote about that. A lot of people don't know, but Josephus wrote that when Titus was sieging Jerusalem, there were reports of aerial phenomenon in the sky over the city of Jerusalem. So as far back as you go in history, there's always been that. However, around 1947, 48, 49, there was a massive uptick globally, and specifically in the United States of America. That's when we had the saucers on Mount Rainier, the term there when Arnold was flying his plane and he saw the saucers. Well, that really coincided, I think, with the nation of Israel and some prophetic calendars that came online. So as far back as 1948, there has always been aerial phenomenon. Some have even argued that that's really what the first initial mission of the Air Force was. In the early 50s, there was a huge uproar because there were visibly seen UFOs over the U.S. Capitol. So it's always been there. The Pentagon has played back and forth with Project Blue Book. They've played back and forth with the Condon Report, the Majestic 12, all of those. But there has never been a time, so far as I can recall, where something, and the video shows it, but where something this unidentified and yet tangible, they go, yeah, we don't know what that is, and we're going to release it, and we're actually going to just accept that it is a UFO. That was a stunning thing, because we've been dealing with this now for 40, 50, 60 years, and you get nothing from them.
Well, a few comments that I want to bring up real quick. And by the way, if you got a comment question, we'll try and get to some of those, but we do want to stay on topic tonight. So, drop a comment in, but try and keep it as closely related to the topic as possible. This is a good comment, and there's a follow-up one by another listener. TD Gropey says, when the government admits to some UFOs and almost nobody notices or cares, we're living in wild times. And that's what I've seen. And this other commenter says the same thing. Jonathan Keener says, amen, I'm not sure what bothers me more, what's going on in the world, or the fact that the masses don't seem to notice or care. And I am noticing that too. I mean, this was almost nothing.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting because there's always been the concept that we can't have disclosure because it would create mass chaos and mass panic. So I was just looking at an old clip earlier today of the day the world stood still. And you've got this saucer, which, by the way, you've got to go and Google the Museum of the Dead Sea Scroll. The Museum of the Dead Sea Scroll, which is connected, some people believe, with the alien agenda, is housed in a museum that looks like a UFO. It's very fascinating. But there's always been this idea that you'd have tanks and guns and mass chaos and people would be panicked. But I don't think so. That might have been 50, 60 years ago. Even earlier back when Orson Welles did the War of the Worlds. We have been told that when he did War of the Worlds, it created mass chaos and panic. However, there's really good historical data that says it did not. That was actually a lie that was perpetrated by newspapers who were afraid of at that point, birthing movement of radio. And so they exaggerated what actually happened so that they could use and talk radio down and maintain a monopoly on the information line, which was newspaper. So even as far back as when Orson Welles was doing that, whether or not there would have been mass panic is questionable. But I think it's arguable now, Brother Randy, that there really wouldn't be mass panic because we've had a solid, 50 years, 40 years, 30 years at minimum of conditioning that it's not a matter of if this is going to happen. In the mind of the American people or Western civilization, for that matter, it's a matter of when it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you where a lot of people are going on this on some of the different UFO sites. There's a Facebook fan site for a group they've created on MUFON. Now, it's not official. It's just a fan site that was created. But somebody posted a meme asking about aliens, whether or not that is our gods. Mm. And just comment after comment after comment was saying, yes, I believe that. I believe they're the creators. I believe that's how the earth exists. And it went on so much, and then debates were being ignited in there, but it went on so much, the moderators finally shut down the comment section because people were totally accepting of this idea that maybe that's how we got here. Maybe they are the ones that we are accountable to.
Well, yeah, I think that's the direction that we're going, especially when you start tying it in with the Bible. There's an interesting thing, and I think it might have been you and I or someone else the other day, we were talking. There's an interesting phrase that Jesus says in the book of Matthew, many will come in my name and say that I am Christ. Now, when you read that grammatically, there's two particular venues that you can take in the English idiom. The one is that there are many, and each one of them are going to say, I am Christ. And that seems to be the way that we usually read it. You're going to have a lot of, and we picture it this way, a lot of these hippies running around going, hey, I'm Jesus. But nobody really believes that, and nobody's really fooled by that. I don't know how that's going to deceive the elect. And remember, whatever delusion, whatever deception is coming in the tribulation, it's so powerful that Jesus said it could deceive the elect. That's how powerful it's going to be. So I don't think you can read it that way, but I think a possible reading of that English text in idiom is the many are going to say, I am Christ. In other words, they're going to say, look, we are the embodiment. We are the embodiment of Christ, of Buddha, of Muhammad, all of these people down through the years that you thought were just religious leaders. That's who we are. We've been trying to help you, and now we're revealing ourselves to you. And simply the culmination of that is going to be, the Antichrist. And maybe in a little while we can get to that, because we were talking before the show started that I think that there's good hard data that the Catholic Church is prepping for that very theological tectonic shift in the way we see religion. I think they're already prepping that way.
Yeah. Now, you came prepared with some different things that you're bringing on board. I believe one of them, is it the full videos as far as what was relayed through the media?
I think if we got, Brother Kevin, do we have the Tic Tac video? I think it'd be good for people to see it, even if they've seen it before, maybe in the past, to actually see that, because even though it's a little bit grainy and a little bit blurry, it's not grainy and blurry because you've got some guy out in the woods trying to get his iPhone. This is a high velocity camera working in a high velocity aerial vehicle, taking a picture. In other words, this is military footage that we're looking at. And so these pilots, this is not some Yahoo with a Kodak here. These are difficult shots to take because it's a difficult thing to catch. Let's take a look, if we can, at the video and let people see it.
The U.S. Navy has finally acknowledged that videos appearing to show UFOs flying through the air are real. They don't call them UFOs. They call them unidentified aerial phenomena. The several videos they're talking about were recorded years ago by fighter pilots. Then in 2017, they were made public by the New York Times. More now from our Randy Kay.
Look at this thing. It's rotating.
Images of that rotating thing captured by U.S. Navy aircraft. Sensors locking in on the target. Commander David Fravor saw it firsthand during a training mission, describing it like a 40-foot-long tic-tac, maneuvering rapidly and changing direction.
As we both looked out the right side of our airplane, we saw a disturbance in the water and a white object, oblong, pointing north.
The object was first sighted in 2004, then similar objects again in 2015. Footage of the sightings, declassified by the military, weren't made public until December 2017 by the New York Times and a group that researches UFOs.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude.
This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. The ability to hover over the water and then start a vertical climb from basically zero up towards about 12,000 feet, and then accelerate in less than 2 seconds and disappear is something I had never seen in my life.
The Navy says it still doesn't know what the objects are, and officials aren't speculating. A Navy spokesman simply confirming to CNN the objects seen in the various clips are unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs.
The UFO reports were first investigated by a secret $22 million program, part of the Defense Department budget, that investigated reports of UFOs. The program has since been shut down, but it was run by a military intelligence official who told CNN they found compelling evidence that we, quote, may not be alone. Randy Kay, CNN, New York.
So I love that we found compelling evidence that we may not be alone. So, okay, I'm glad you finally came to that compelling evidence after spending $22 million. Yeah, you know what immediately hits me about that? So they would describe that as a 40-foot long oblong tic-tac. Well, it's from my background, I would describe it as a roll. Zechariah chapter number 5, a flying roll. So picture in your mind a flying parchment roll. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of space between a tic tac and a roll. So it's very, very interesting. That roll that's talked about there in Zechariah is a flying roll. And so whatever that imagery is, it's very interesting that that's the image that the Pentagon is saying, yeah, it was a tic tac. The other thing that I found that was interesting was that the pilot got into was the G forces that he was talking about. I'm just not sure, and I'd have to do some really heavy research, or maybe there's somebody out there. But if they played that video again and did the research, I'm not sure that the speeds and the angular momentum and the G forces that would be result, I'm not sure that the human body would be able to take that in the natural. So it was very, very, very interesting what he was talking about.
So as we look at this and we try to put some of these pieces together, it's funny because we were sitting here just a few months ago in January, and I don't want to come on tonight and be the guy who said I told you so, but in January we talked about this coming to America, and people literally on the broadcast in the comment section mocked the idea that it was coming here.
Oh yeah,
and, it was a joke, and then it comes here, and we mention on a latter broadcast, guys, you might want to watch out for government control, and that was a joke.
Yeah.
And now we've got guys who, for a long time, were really on the other side of the fence at the start that are saying, yeah, they're pushing a little bit now. But I'm kind of here now at this period, and me personally, the reason I wanted to bring you on is because I'm like, what is this? Like, how do we even explain this?
Well, so remember now, it's easy to forget, but remember it wasn't all that long ago when Donald Trump was talking about Space Force.
Yes.
So we actually have, if you think about it, we've got the Army, the Navy, Air Force, Marines, and the Coast Guard. Now, isn't it interesting that the number 6 of man, the number 6 is Space Force. And so now all of a sudden we have a Space Force. And then you have the Pentagon saying, yeah, we've got these aerial phenomenon here. And they're releasing it like that. And it's very interesting, the timing. And like one of the viewers said, there's not a lot of uproar about it. And I don't know that there's going to be, because there is going to be a conditioning. I mentioned this. If you've ever watched the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the special effects, are 70s, 80s at best, but the storyline is worth just watching. Some people believe, much like Stanley Kubrick when he did The Shining in 2001, some people believe that is actually a biographical event that took place. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. There's a French scientist on there who is patterned after this author, Jacques Vallée, who wrote Messengers of Deception. And he actually did a seminal work on this, connecting UFO contact and cults together. And then one of the things that he talked about here, he said the most clear results was that the phenomenon behaved like a conditioning process. The logic of conditioning uses absurdity and confusion to achieve its goal while hiding its mechanism. And I really do believe, Brother Randy, that we have come to a place where the people are conditioned, and we're not all that far away from them saying, you know what, we do need help. We are ready for the stars to come down. And look, I don't mind being the guy that said I told you so, because I remember getting off of the air in January and getting several, listen, in fact, I think one person actually sent me and said, you just need to stick with the Bible or something like that. I forget, because this stuff is nonsense. Well, here we are. Churches are closed. Government, here we're dealing with this. And I think it's because fundamentally we, and I'm talking about Christians, we have become materialistically log jammed. Mm-hmm. We have been reading Ephesians 6:12 for 100 years and not believed a lick of it. So if our tire goes flat on the way to church, it's the devil. It's not that we bought a crappy tire. It's the devil that did it. But we haven't believed anything we've read in Revelation, anything we've read in Ephesians. We don't believe that an angelic chariot literally picked up a human body in the form of Elijah. We've said it, talked it, But then when you actually say, hey, it might be happening, no, it can't be. And I think it's because we've got a very materialistic frame of reference as
Yes.
believers.
I remember probably close to when I first met you, you were discussing on one of the Soul Trap podcasts that the forces of darkness, it's almost like a pyramid, that the farther you get to the top, dealing with governments and those high places, there's a lot more demonic activity there than there necessarily is at a slumber party where they're playing a Ouija board.
Yeah. Well,
And,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just think with what you're saying, a lot of preachers are missing that, and when they preach their sermons that deal with demonic things, it is the Ouija board at the teenager slumber party, and they totally miss out that there are things going on in the government. And I mean, look at our Supreme Court. We're not far removed from the American people having rallies not to vote for a president because he was a Roman Catholic.
Right.
And now look at our Supreme Court.
Right. They were afraid that Reagan wouldn't get elected because he was divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're exactly right. There is a theory, and I'm not sure that I espouse this 100%, but there is a theory in some corners of the UFO world that believe that in 1947, 48, 50, somewhere along in there, that there was a quote unquote contact, an official contact. Some people actually believe it was with Eisenhower, that there was a contact made, and I wouldn't put it past the powers of darkness to initially manifest themselves to this world as, and I'm going to use the term alien or extraterrestrial beings. And that they actually, that's why some of the stories in like X-Files and some of these others, they actually said, listen, we want to prepare the world for this. We do want to hybrid the world. And that has been going on now for about 40, 50 years behind the scenes. And at the very top echelon, there's only a few that are aware of that. But that's going on. Now, that's interesting because Arthur C. Clarke is a very, very prominent, or was a very, very prominent sci-fi writer. And in Childhood's End, which is one of his most famous books, he wrote about the alien or the extraterrestrial that stayed hidden for a long time. But when they showed themselves, it was hard for the people to accept them because they looked like the devil. They looked like what people thought the devil was. Mm-hmm. And so there was this, they were preparing the next generation of children, and they were moving on and that kind of thing like that. A lot of people think, Arthur C. Clarke, X-Files, Man in the High Castle, some of these different things, why is it pieced together? And it's because at the top end of that pyramid that we're talking about, there already has been contact made. It's just when, the genre calls it disclosure, we would call it revelation. When will that be revealed? And I don't know that we'll be here for that, but I think that that's a very valid thing maybe for Christians to have to ask, because there needs to be, and I know this is going to sound crazy when I say it, but there should be an extraterrestrial theology, because it's not extraterrestrial. It is demonic in nature, but that's what they're going to manifest themselves as. They're not going to come in with horns and a pitchfork. I think they're going to come in very Aryan looking, very, very familiar, strangely familiar to us. And if the statistics are correct when it comes to abduction, the abduction cases are far higher than are actually being reported. So you've got potentially millions, if not hundreds of millions globally, that either in a sleep or in a stage 1, 2, or 3 abduction have already met these extraterrestrials. So the world is being primed for it. And I just don't know. Christians are assuming we're going to be out of here before any of this kind of happens, but I don't know that we will.
Well, the whole abduction thing, the last statistic I read, and this was reported by NBC in a news article, just kind of conveniently slipped in that there is a 6% rate of people who claim to be abducted. And like you say, I believe that it's probably much higher than that, but 6% of people have said that they have had an abduction experience. And that's not counting the many that have not admitted that. But if you're doing that, that's 6% of the American population. That's over 19 million people that say they have been abducted. How do you have 19 million people that say something and we just write it off as nonsense?
Oh yeah, I agree, and I think again, even when you get into that, and you nailed it, even when you get into that, then there is the grades of abduction. Okay, so some people have had what we would call the full spectrum abduction, where they believe they've actually been carried into a spaceship or another dimension. But then there are people that have encountered beings in their home. Then there are people that have encountered dream beings and waking dreams and things like that. So you're right. The number is astronomically high. But even if you just stopped at 19, 20 million, how can you have that many people and it's just not reported at all? It's just left alone. And I think that we're way behind the curve, because I do believe that there is a theology being created for that. And it's interesting. I mentioned this before the show. If you don't mind, I want to share real quick. There's a book called Exo Vaticana, and I don't. There's only one book that I endorse 100%, and so that's the Bible. But there's a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with this book, but it's well worth it. One of the things that's interesting about this, it's written by Chris Putnam and Thomas Horn, is that it deals with the connection with Catholicism. Now, Avril Manhattan, and I'm kind of taking a jut off to come back. Avril Manhattan basically said that there's nothing, and I'm paraphrasing, but in one of his books, he said there's basically nothing that happens on the geopolitical theater that the Catholic Church does not have its hands in somehow, some way. That's a very broad statement to make, and he was not a Christian. He was a secular historian, basically. But for him to make that statement is very powerful. Well, when you start looking at the power and you start looking at the connection of the Bible and then the Antichrist, one of the things that happens and comes up is that as we're talking, there is hard data that the Catholic Church is actually formulating and has formulated their own theology of the extraterrestrial. Now, they actually have a very high-powered telescope with the acronym Lucifer, if you can believe that. But that's the truth. But some of their heavy hitters, for instance, there's a Vatican astronomer who was a Jesuit priest by the name of Guy Consolmagno. Now, he's actually taught at Harvard, MIT, worked with NASA. He has written extensively. And in one of his writings, he actually, quote, this is what he says. He says, quote, "We will soon be looking to the aliens to be the saviors of humanity." Now, this is not some weirdo. He says, whether you interpret these creatures, and he's actually talking about Genesis 6 in this quote. He says, whether you interpret these creatures as angels or aliens doesn't really matter for the sake of our argument here. The point is that the ancient writers of the Bible, like all ancient peoples, were perfectly happy with the possibility that other intelligent beings could exist. And he writes one thing, this is very interesting, and listen to this. This is a profound quote now. This is a heavy hitter in the Jesuit priest. He says, Consolmagno writes, "Perhaps it is not so far-fetched to see the second person of the Trinity, the Word." Now remember what I said earlier in Matthew, many shall come saying, "I am Christ." He says, it's not so far-fetched to see the second person of the Trinity, who was present in the beginning, and came to lay down his life and take it up again, not only as the Son of Man, but also as a child of other extraterrestrial races. Now, that's a Jesuit Catholic priest that's an astronomer. There was another guy by the name of Monsignor Corrado. His last name is Balducci. He was a very famous theologian in the Catholic Church and an exorcist. He actually wrote, he said, right now, amongst those who are at the highest levels of Vatican administration and geopolitics know what's going on in space and what's approaching us could be of great import in the next 5 to 10 years. So these are some pretty heavy hitters. There's one more I'll give you if you got time for one more quick quote. This is from Father Giuseppe Tanzellaniti. He's an actual theologian for the Opus Dei. And he said, this is amazing what he's quoting here. He says, every believer in God would, he argues, greet an extraterrestrial civilization as an extraordinary experience and would be inclined to respect the alien and recognize the common origin of our different species as being from the same creator. According to Giuseppe, this contact by non-terrestrial intelligence would then offer new possibilities of better understanding the relationship between God and all of creation. He says we would renounce our faith in God as limited, and we would only fully understand God in accordance with the new revelation of our new brothers. So when you start looking and reading, I mean, the Catholic Church there's some high-level hitters there that are already trying to formulate a theology, because I think, to some degree, some of their heavy hitters believe 2 Thessalonians and 1 Thessalonians maybe more than some of our heavy hitters do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, it's funny. I was just sitting here thinking that I'm not a date setter. I've never set a date on the rapture. And most of the preachers I've sat under throughout my lifetime, they've never set dates on the rapture either. But you and I, we kind of have a shared background. We know about a lot of fundamentalism and whatnot. And as a young man sitting in those pews, it was amazing, even without setting any kind of date or expectation for a date. Those men could make you feel like Jesus was coming back before the service was going to end.
Oh yeah.
There was that anticipation, and even as a believer, it's kind of because it's foreign to the flesh. You don't know what to expect, and maybe people don't think about it as deeply as I have on some of these levels, but it's almost a nervous anticipation. Like, what's this going to be like? What will it?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen? How are these things going to pan out? And I've never been one that has talked about every time a bus blows up in Israel that it's a sign of Jesus coming. But with everything that's happening and the overwhelming conditioning that is taking place, you can't help but believe that it is getting closer and closer to being fulfilled.
Oh yeah. You're exactly right. I mean, I grew up, my dad went to Tennessee Temple in the heyday. He graduated in 78. And, but we spent we would go twice every year to Sammy Allen's camp meeting. And then we went over to Harold Seitler and being from Salisbury, North Carolina. I mean, that's just what we cut our teeth on. And so, if you didn't preach back then, if you didn't preach on the second coming about once, maybe twice a month, you weren't right with God. I mean, it was, and it was, so we've lost some of that, but you're exactly right. There is definitely, I don't know. It's interesting when you were talking, I was just looking up in Second Timothy. It says, in the end time, evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. It's not just that they're going to, like for instance, and I don't want to digress into the fact that we were 100% right about the Wuhan virus and many of the naysayers were 100% wrong. That would be awful to gloat like that. And I wouldn't want to do that we were right and so many
Amen.
People were wrong. That would be not classy, San Diego. But to be fair, when you look at the Wuhan virus, you look at that and you go, why, how are these people not seeing what we're seeing? And I'm talking about our leaders. It's because they're being deceived. The deception is growing. And I think that trickles down into Christianity. There is a deception that is that's trickling down. And again, I come back to it, that's why many of our guys struggle when they go to the mission field. They're not used to dealing with spiritual wickedness that's out in the open. The reality of the powers of darkness. And talking about what you did, that's something that we were talking about before. And in that book, Messengers of Deception, that's something that he brings out quite a bit, is that there is, when you look at the accounts of abduction, and one of the things that's important is you always have to keep abduction and then the UFO phenomenons a little bit separate. But when you look at the cases of abductions or encounters of the entities, there is this confusion, this deception, this absurdity. And I think it's all hallmarks of the powers of darkness myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely confusion. Prime example. One of the issues, and one of the commenters mentioned it. Here it was. Jonathan Keener was talking about the extraterrestrial theology idea. Said the vast majority of American Christians have no concept of the idea, and I agree with them. But not only do they have no concept of this idea, there's a lot of doctrinal things they have no concept of anymore, because pastors have gone from being proclaimers of doctrine into motivational speakers, and it's every message. I've watched a lot of preaching over the past month, 40 days since all of this happened, and the majority of preaching is it's okay. There's hope in the government turning things back on. We're going to get through this. Mm-hmm. And I understand maybe if a guy doesn't want to deal head on with some of the topics that I feel like should be dealt with right now, if they don't want to, that's their business. But the issue, they're not even dealing with doctrine anymore. It's just motivational talk after motivational talk on how we can make our lives better. There's a reason American Christians have no concept of these things.
Yeah. I think listen, I think you're exactly right. And I think it's because, and staying on task, if we stay on what we're talking about, it's one of those things where you can read it, but are you actually stopping to think about what the text is saying? So let's talk, for instance, for just obvious of Elijah being caught up in a chariot of fire. Now, both of those men, Elijah and Elisha, both of those men were physical beings. Okay, they were physical rooted in this physicist world, this physical world we have. So this spiritual thing, chariot of fire, the horses and chariot, it came from the spiritual dimension, but it was able to physically pick up or to levitate or to do whatever it did to a physical being, and then take Elijah, so far as we know, to the other dimension. We don't know whether his body was transformed or not. So that has always been fascinating to me, because was his body glorified for him to be able to get to the other side? If not, where is the other side? And how does he have to have a body to get to that other side in that way? You see where I'm tracking? Mm-hmm. But you're talking about a real physical thing that took place. And when you slow down there for just a minute, you go, okay. Well, then you've got Jesus coming to the clouds of the air. It's very interesting to me that even God, and I say this with all reverence, but he even seems to limit himself on how he interacts with this world and working in that. But you've got Jesus coming to the clouds in the air. Everything, as it tracks towards the end, is going up into the air. And yet everything in our preaching today is so earthy. It's so, just like you said, motivational. And I think preachers are just very, very, and I'm not going to bring up, I'm not trying to get into Ruckman, but I think he was right. I think ridicule is one of the biggest things. People are scared to death of being ridiculed. And maybe being called charismatic or kooky or whatever it is like that. But you're exactly right. And while we're tracking one way, we're missing out, because the world is exactly tracking the other way. Oh, you want an antichrist with a system where everybody can take a mark? Here's a virus. Here it's coming. Oh, you want something to reveal itself from heaven? Okay, well, here's the Pentagon releasing this. Oh, you want a government looking up to the sky? Here's the Space Force. I mean, everything is tracking that way. It's like the Christian world's still over here dealing with 1990s problems. That we're past that, man. We're way past, hey, you've got too big a Suburban. We're way beyond that issue right now. We have to catch up to where we are.
Well, we're dealing with these issues, and we've got about 15 minutes left. So I'm kind of going to start moving towards the close of this. But we have all of these issues now that we've talked about as far as connecting dots, the conditioning, the whole deal with the UFOs being released. I don't know if you read it, but there was an article about a county in Montana to go in and buy anything in a store, you had to wear a pink band, to signify that you were not sick or under quarantine orders. I mean, all of these things are connecting. They're pushing us towards the end. A lot of people may have not thought about as far as how this meshes with the end times. And for those who may have not thought about that, could you put maybe a fine tip on that as far as why would this be a bigger deal going into the time of tribulation? Why would UFOs, aliens, and whatnot? And before you do, just let me mention, I talked to you about this chart that Hynek created. He was a skeptic at first, from my understanding, and then he went on to be a believer in these phenomenon, and he created the classification of the CE1, CE2, CE3 close encounters. And then later on, Jacques Vallée added the fourth and fifth to that. And as far as those close encounters that Vallée added, it was to actually be abducted and then people actually being killed in these. So as time goes on, it seems like we're becoming more interconnected with these ideas. Could you put a fine tip on that as far as going into the tribulation with it?
Yeah, here's the thing, and I'm going to piece together. Let me read, because you brought him up. Let me read to you what Jacques Vallée said. He said, "I propose that the UFO we see is, among other things, a device which creates a distortion of the witness's reality, that it does so for a purpose, which is to project images or fabricated scenes designed to change our belief systems." Now that's from a guy that's not a Christian. And I think that that's very, very profound. And here's what he says again. He said, "The public is already cynical about the roles and values of government, science, and the military establishment. The mere statement that unknown objects are penetrating our atmosphere and maneuvering at will further erode the people's confidence in the political structure. Sooner or later," and this is very key, he says, "sooner or later, the emotions stored in the UFO phenomenon will be released. What kind of social reaction will appear then? There may be new churches, new political movements. Each sector of society will react in its own way." So he sees and understands what I think we do not. I believe in my heart, Brother Randy, that we have been conditioned to assume as Christians, and I'm talking about our crowd now, rapturous, premillennial, pre-trib, that we're going to be walking down the mall, boom, we're out of here. But God, time, the Bible operates in the time-space continuum. In other words, Jesus was going to be crucified. He was not going to be killed by the Babylonians. He was not a Persian. There was a world in which he entered, born at that time. And that time-space continuum is what he operated in. Well, I believe in the imminency of the Lord, but I also believe that there is going to be a preparation in the time-space continuum for the next stage of God's plan. And so what we're seeing, whether it's the Wuhan virus or whether it's the UFO, is we're seeing now across the board a global preparation for the dominant control of what? I think we're seeing the earth being prepared for the star god, that Prometheus antitype, that Antichrist, to show up and to rule the world. And it is very, very clear and obvious that the world now, all it needs is one more nudge. You let there be a few more thousand people die. You let the next virus come on and really be deadly, the world will go crazy. I mean, if it's making you wear bands now, you let there be 1 million people die. and watch how quick things change. And so to me, these are not independent cogs operating. They are connecting gears to a machine. And you've got Star Force, you've got the election coming up, you've got the Wuhan virus, you've got the Tic Tac video, and they are gears in a machine that is creating an environment in which the powers of darkness will be able to fully manifest themselves. And I think that it's always been that way. But what I think we're seeing right now is we're seeing from the top of the triangle or the pyramid, we're seeing that start to go further down the pyramid and manifest itself more and more. And sadly, what I think has happened is that a lot of Christians have misunderstood. And I don't want to digress too much, but there's been two things that I've watched over this past 2 months. And that is Christians not understanding the spiritual ramifications of the battle, and Christians looking at what we're talking about now as entertainment. And say, yeah, that's cool. Let's talk about aliens. Yeah, that's really cool, man. I hope a little gray doesn't. But it's not. We're not describing little green men from planet Reticulon. We're describing what the Chinese described. We're describing what the Sumerians, what the Akkadians, the Anunnaki. We're describing what Genesis 6 is exactly talking about, and what Jesus himself said, as in the days of Noah, these things are going to come about. And so it's more than entertainment, it's more than speculation. I think there needs to be a hard look at our theology that says, what are we going to do if Christians, if before we get out of here, what if there was a terrestrial manifestation? Because if I think you and I are probably on the same page, that if you look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that's midway through the tribulation point. I'm assuming we're there, but where the man of sin will be revealed. You know, that might not happen fully until he sits on the throne in the temple. Okay, but what's to say that these beings don't start showing up before we get out of here? I've always found it very interesting, the warning to Paul in our dispensation. I've always found it very interesting that he says, though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel. So I've got to look at that and go, is that hyperbole? Is he just using an extreme? Or is it possible that in the church age, we may have to go, no, I don't care what they say or where they come from or what beings they claim to be. We hold true to the word of God. I mean, I never had thought of that before, but I would have never imagined we'd be where we are now with the Wuhan virus. Is it possible that we could be standing up against angels going, no, they're wrong? Something to think about. Enoch, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry. So no, sorry. I was just going to say, listen, Enoch was dealing with that. If you look at Noah as a type of Israel going through the tribulation, and if you look at Enoch as a type of the church being raptured out, Enoch was right smack dab in the middle of dealing with angels. And even the book of Enoch, which is not inspired scripture, but may be a historical document, he was writing about it and dealing with it. So if Enoch is a type of the church, right, could we in the end times be having to stand up and dealing with that or seeing that as a remnant? That's at least a valid question for us to ask. It's not your bus building, Sunday school, pack a pew Sunday kind of a question, but it may be the real question that we're dealing with in the days ahead.
Sure. Well, you never know. People might get more kids on their bus if they were talking about some of these things.
Maybe. I think that's what most people are thinking about, really, in the long run.
Yes, I do too. Well, there was a preacher in the late 90s that made a statement. He said, while he was preaching concerning Matthew 24, he said, we have our toes in the tribulation. And what he meant by that statement was, we're not there. And he was pre-trib. We're not there. We're not going to be there, but we are already starting to experience things that will be there, that will be indicative of the tribulation. And one of the things that we can kind of take away from this is during the tribulation, as it was in the days of Noah, a lot of times guys put that as right now, that we're living in those days. I'm not so sure about that doctrinally. I believe that the tribulation is those days, and the flood that comes and takes them all away is the day of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that we're going to be on the cusp of experiencing some of those things that classified the days of Noah. And if that's a fact, it was hybrids, if you will, angel-human hybrids that they were having to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating to think. Again, I never have, and I don't believe that there's any debate. I don't want to be misunderstood at all. That the Book of Enoch is not inspired scripture at all, and even some of its historical matter can be dubious at times. You have to take it like you would any other book. I do find it interesting that, though, in the Book of Enoch, that it does talk about the watchers and the number 200, the 200 watchers. What's fascinating about that is that Absalom, that was the number of men that were following Absalom. If you remember, there were 200 vain and light persons that followed Absalom. And I think you can make a case for Absalom being a type of the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you start connecting that long hair with rebellion, and then those beasts over there in Revelation, the hair of a woman, the face of a man. So I guess the question that we're getting down to is, when you see the Pentagon saying, yeah, that's aerial phenomenon, and they're releasing it. When you see these things percolating, again, I think Christians have to start asking themselves, are we going to, like you said, are we going to see some of these things? I mean, when you think about it, that's a lot to cram into to 7 years, the first 3.5 years for sure. So when you think about that, it's a lot to cram in. Paul's warning us about angels. He's warning us about deception. And I had mentioned this, I think you and I were talking the other day, just off the cuff. Very interesting, the reference that Paul makes in 2 Timothy 3, right? He says, as Jannes and Jambres withstood Moses. Well, it's interesting that's a reference back to those magicians fighting against. Okay, so why would he reference that? That particular thing. That's very interesting. He does the same thing again. I think it's 2 Corinthians, where he said, as Satan beguiled Eve. He talks about us. In other words, I think when you read through the Apostle Paul's, the church epistles, and you read it with a very discriminating eye, I think the assumption that, hey, we skate out of here with a latte in one hand and a Gap bag in the other, I just don't see that. But I don't think that the average Christian leader, and I think this is what has to be differentiated. Going back to the Wuhan and the whole issue with churches, my problem has always been with the leadership of movement, because when you claim the mantle of leadership, you have a responsibility to your followers. You have a responsibility to your influence. And so what I think that we've seen is that our leaders are behind the times. They don't understand the spiritual attack. If I've had one person say it, I've had 100 say, look, good men have called me and said, listen, I don't believe this is an attack on the church, because it's not specifically for the church. It's for everyone. Well, that was the case when they told Daniel he couldn't pray. Everyone couldn't pray. That was the case when they told everyone to bow down to the image. Everyone had to bow down. But if you're naive, if you don't think that Satan would gladly close down for 2 months 100 bars if he could destroy just one church.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't think that he's willing, I mean, isn't that the master chess player? You're willing to sacrifice a pawn if I can get your rook or your bishop. And so Satan has no problem. He can sprout another 100 bars just like that. But how much damage, how easy is it to take out a church? Well, see, I just think that we're not seeing what's going on, and our leaders would scan through something like that Tic Tac, UFO, go, that's kind of silliness. It's not. That's what's coming. It's coming from the stars. I don't believe the Antichrist is going to be some spooky Svengali kind of a guy out of Europe that has a Russian accent and looks Jewish. I think this guy's going to come from the sky. And if I had to personally guess, I would guess that he looks very, very, very familiar like Jesus. I think all the pictures that you see, I think there's going to be something very familiar. I personally think that there's going to be millions of people that will say, I've seen him in my dreams. I've seen him in my thought. I just think that it's going to be a lot different than what we think that it's going to be.
Sure. Well, there's a lot for folks to think about tonight, and I hope they walk away from this broadcast actually thinking about some of these things. I've got friends, and some of which I believe are watching right now, that know people that have come to them and talked to them and sought counsel and advice about them being abducted, facing an abduction experience. And I just do not feel like the average Christian is equipped to handle something like that. And the first thing they'll do is write it off as a mental illness. Well, they've got something wrong in their head. We may start dealing with an influx of these things. So we might want to put some thought into them and get prepared so we can help others.
I agree. And what's interesting, and I know that we have talked about this before, but the high ratio in abduction cases and in encounter cases is sexual, and is ritualistic abuse, and is generational. It's an astronomical high amount that is generational, and it happens to a lot of children. There's a movie called Fallen Skies, Dark Skies, Brother Kevin. I can't remember. There's a movie. It's either Fallen Skies or Dark Skies. I think it's Dark Skies. There is a movie about that, and you have to be careful. There's some scenes in it that I think would be inappropriate. But if you can get through those and watch it, it's actually, there's a character in there patterned after Bud Hopkins, who is a big time writer, and it talks about that. In fact, there is a book that everyone should have, written by David M. Jacobs. And it's called "They Walk Among Us," the alien plan to control humanity. This guy is not some yahoo. He is a doctor. I believe he taught, I want to say at Harvard or someplace like that. But he does charts. It's a little bit of a dry book, but once you start getting the adjustment of what's going on, he does charts and tracking of cases. And this guy is not a Christian. He would think that you and I were nuts, but he's sitting here going, hey, man, they're here. They're walking among us. They're here now. They're walking among us. Well, you can make a case that Jesus might have been saying that in Matthew 13. That's why the disciples never had a question about there were good and bad. That parable threw them off. That was something that really threw them for a loop. So I agree with you, man. I think our churches have a lot more of this in it than we think. And I will say this, and then I'll get out of there. But I think one of the windows to alien abduction, which has not been maybe fully researched, but I would be willing to bet you within the last 20, 25 years, but especially the last 10 to 15, has been the connection between access to pornography online, just like that. I mean, 2007 was a seminal year, right? That's when you had the iPhone and all these kind of things explode, and the cases of abduction are going up. And I would be willing to bet you that there's a real connection between the window of pornography and access that the powers of darkness have to that mind late at night. A lot of things going on there.
Sure. Amen. Well, take away what you will from the broadcast. Think about it. As always, I encourage everybody to do your own study. Don't take what we say at face value. Do your own study. Think about it. There'll be some who walk away with thoughts. Then I'm looking at a comment from Tim Pomeroy. He said he's scratching his head. Well, I wouldn't expect anything less of you, Tim. So anyway, walk away with what you will and put some thought into this, all right? God bless you, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Brother Tillis, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thank you. And
an honor having you on.
Well, I'm glad to have everybody, and thank you for having us. And just make sure, if you will, first like and share the Backwoods Bible broadcast. But then in your spare time, go to the Soul Trap on YouTube, the Soul Trap podcast on YouTube. Make sure to like and subscribe that as well. I think there's some great video and material there, and we do have a video on the alien agenda, which speaks a great deal to what we're talking about here. Might be some good information to follow up on.
All right. Go like and share the Soul Trap, the Backwoods Bible broadcast page, and watch these things Brother Tills is putting out. They're always enjoyable and entertaining, but it goes deeper than that. All right. So check that stuff out. God bless you guys. Thank you for watching.